Claire Nolan had always believed birthdays carried a kind of quiet magic. Not the loud confetti-covered kind she saw in movies, but something softer, a promise that the next chapter might be kinder than the last. But as she stood in the hallway of Derek Cole's apartment building, clutching a bakery box that still radiated the warmth of fresh vanilla sponge, there was no magic, only a strange heaviness in her chest and a nagging sense that something was off. She rang the doorbell once, twice, a third time. No answer. Inside, muffled music pulsed against the walls. Not his usual playlist. Something sultrier. She tried to smile at herself, tried to quiet the whisper rising in her mind, but it only grew louder with every second of silence. Just call him. Ask if he is home. Stop overthinking. She knocked again, softer this time, as if that would change the outcome. Nothing. Her throat tightened. She stepped back, glancing down the hall where the elevator chimed distantly. When she returned her gaze to the apartment door, something inside her hardened. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was self-preservation. Maybe it was simply the truth trying to claw its way toward daylight. She walked around the side corridor toward the narrow kitchen window that overlooked the small fire escape. Derek had always complained it was an eyesore. Tonight, it became her only vantage point. She rose on her toes, peered through the half-open blinds, and the world she knew fractured in a single, silent instant. A woman stood at the counter pouring wine, laughing at something out of view. She was wearing Derek's shirt, the blue one Claire had ironed just last week before his presentation. The sleeves hung loosely on her, the collar open, the fabric unmistakable. Claire froze. Her lungs forgot how to draw air. The bakery box slipped slightly in her grip. A faint ringing filled her ears. She blinked once, twice, hoping she had misread, misunderstood, imagined. But the woman turned, and there it was. The definitive truth. Derek's unmistakable silhouette entered frame, hands sliding around another woman's waist. Claire took a single step back as if the ground had burned her. She did not remember walking away from the window. She did not remember reaching the street. She only realized she was outside again when the cold air hit her skin and the cake box tumbled from her hands onto the pavement. Buttercream smeared against the cardboard like the collapse of something once beautiful. Her vision blurred. Her breath hitched. She reached for her phone as if it were the last lifeline she had left. There was no thought guiding her fingers, no logic, only desperation. She opened her contacts. Her thumb landed on one name, Lucas Hart. The call connected after a single ring. She forced out 2 broken words before her voice failed entirely. I need help. And somewhere above the skyline, in the quiet luxury of a penthouse office, Lucas stood up from his desk without hesitation and said he was already on his way. The city blurred past in streaks of gold and shadow as Claire sat curled in the passenger seat of Lucas Hart's car. She did not remember how she got into the black sedan or how Lucas had guided her inside with a quiet steadiness that refused to let her fall apart. The only thing she remembered clearly was the sound of her own heartbeat pounding against her ribs as if trying to escape. Rain had begun to fall sometime during the drive, soft at first, then heavier, layering the windows with liquid distortion. It felt fitting. The world outside was dissolving, and so was everything she thought she knew about her life. Her fingers dug into the fabric of her coat, tightening and loosening without rhythm, as if her body were desperately trying to anchor itself to something real. Lucas kept his eyes on the road, hands steady on the wheel. He did not ask questions. He did not force her to speak. His silence was not cold but deliberate, a space carved out for her grief to exist without judgment. Every so often, Claire caught the faintest shift in his expression when the streetlights washed over him, a kind of quiet fury aimed at the man who had hurt her. She swallowed, tasting bitterness at the back of her throat. I saw him. The words came out in fragments. With someone else. In his shirt. Lucas exhaled, slow and controlled. She waited for the pity, the lecture about ignoring red flags, or the useless comfort people often offered during heartbreak. Instead, he simply asked her to breathe. Just breathe, Claire. You are safe here. Safe. The word cracked something inside her. A tear slid down her cheek before she could stop it. She pressed her palm against her face, embarrassed by her own unraveling. Lucas glanced at her, just once, But that one look carried an understanding she had never expected from him. Not as her CEO, not as the man who ruled boardrooms with terrifying precision, but as someone who recognized the exact shade of pain she was drowning in. The car slowed as they turned onto her street. The familiar row of buildings felt suddenly foreign, as if they belonged to a version of her life that no longer existed. Lucas parked in front of her apartment complex and shifted the car into neutral. The rain intensified, drumming against the roof like a relentless reminder of everything she had lost in the span of a single night. Claire reached for the door handle, but her hand stopped mid-air. She did not want to go inside. The walls of her small apartment would only echo back her thoughts too loudly. She felt Lucas watching her, not intrusively, but with the kind of patience that invited honesty. He spoke softly, the sound deep and steady. "Claire, look at me." She did, his voice lowered, calm and certain. "What you walked away from tonight does not define your worth. Do you hear me? You deserve better than someone who cannot see you." Her breath shuddered. For the first time since she saw Derek's shirt on another woman's body, she felt something other than heartbreak. She felt the faintest flicker of strength. Not enough to stand on, not yet, but enough to stop her from collapsing completely. "Thank you," she whispered. Lucas nodded once, as if sealing an unspoken promise. "I am here, whenever you need me." The rain continued to fall, but inside the car, a fragile kind of refuge had begun to take shape between them. The morning after felt unreal, as if Claire were wandering through the dim outline of someone else's life. Her apartment was quiet enough to hear the hum of the refrigerator and the faint drip of last night's rain sliding down the window. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the image again. Derek's shirt, a stranger's hands, laughter that did not belong to her. She sat on the edge of her couch, wrapped in a blanket she did not remember pulling over herself. Her phone lay face down beside her, vibrating occasionally with messages she could not bear to read. Friends wishing her a happy birthday, a coworker asking for a file. The world continued to move, relentless and indifferent. A soft knock on her door interrupted the stillness. She stiffened, hoping it was not Derek, rehearsing all the ways she refused to be humiliated again. But when she peered through the peephole, her breath faltered. Lucas Hart stood in the hallway. No suit jacket, no boardroom armor, just a dark sweater, damp at the shoulders from the lingering drizzle, and eyes that carried the same exhaustion she felt in her bones. She opened the door slowly. He took one look at her and seemed to understand everything she could not say. "I called earlier," he said. "I wanted to check on you." She nodded, unable to form a proper response. "May I come in?" Normally she would have hesitated. He was her CEO. The man who signed her paychecks, but today, none of those boundaries felt sharp enough to cut through what she was going through. She stepped aside. Lucas walked in carefully, as if entering sacred ground. He glanced around the small living room, then back at her, and spoke with a gentleness that surprised her. "You should not be alone today." Claire swallowed hard. She wanted to argue, to insist she was fine, but the words would not come. Her chest tightened. Her eyes burned again. Lucas stepped closer, but not too close, just enough for his voice to wrap around her like something warm. "Tell me what you need, Claire." She let out a broken laugh. "I do not know. I do not know anything right now." He studied her for a long moment, and then something shifted in his expression, a decision forming. "Then let me take you somewhere else, just for a few days." She blinked. "Somewhere else?" "This city is full of reminders you do not deserve. Let us disappear from it for a while." She stared at him, stunned. Was this truly happening? Her CEO standing in her living room, offering escape as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Lucas continued, his tone steady, grounded. "I am not suggesting we run away from reality forever, but I know what heartbreak does to a mind. I know how it traps you in the same four walls and convinces you there is no air left. Let me give you some space to breathe." Claire's pulse quickened. She opened her mouth, searching for reasons to refuse. Her job, his job, appearances, logic. But grief had hollowed all of those arguments. and the sincerity in Lucas's eyes left no room for doubt about his intentions. "Where would we go?" she asked softly. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Somewhere quiet, somewhere beautiful, somewhere no one knows your name." She exhaled, long and shaky. For the first time since last night, the crushing weight on her chest eased just a fraction. "Okay," she whispered. "Take me away from here." Lucas nodded once, as if sealing the beginning of something neither of them fully understood yet. "Pack a small bag, Claire. We leave in an hour." An hour later, Claire found herself sitting in the back of Lucas Hart's car as it glided through traffic with quiet authority. The world outside her window felt muted, as if someone had turned the volume down on reality. She clutched the handle of her small overnight bag, a hastily assembled collection of clothes and toiletries that made the whole thing feel unreal. They did not stop at the commercial airport. The sedan slipped through a security gate and into a private terminal where a sleek white jet waited on the tarmac, engines humming like a distant promise. Claire stared through the windshield, her breath catching. Intellectually, she had always known Lucas was wealthy. Seeing the private aircraft waiting for them made that knowledge suddenly three-dimensional. Lucas stepped out first, then circled around to open her door. The air smelled of jet fuel and wet concrete. For a moment she hesitated, one foot still in the safe shadow of the car. He extended a hand, steady and unhurried. She took it, letting him lead her across the tarmac and up the narrow stairs into a world of soft leather seats and warm, indirect lighting. As the jet lifted away from the city, the skyline shrank into a cluster of glittering lines. Claire watched it fall behind them, feeling an odd mix of loss and relief. Lucas sat across from her, jacket folded neatly beside him, sleeves rolled to reveal strong forearms. His laptop rested on the table between them, a constellation of graphs and numbers frozen on the screen. After a while he spoke, his voice low over the gentle roar of the engines. "People think success makes you immune to being blindsided. It does not." Then he told her, in broad strokes, about the first company he had tried to build in his 20s, about the partner who had smiled with him for photographs and shaken his hand in front of investors and then sold their core idea to a larger competitor behind his back. About finding out not from a confession, but from a press release. The betrayal had shaped him. The guarded expression he carried into every negotiation made sense now. He understood what it meant to have the ground ripped out from under you by someone you trusted completely. By the time the jet descended into the pale light of dawn, Claire felt strangely lighter. Exhausted, yes, but no longer suffocated. The small private airstrip sat on the edge of a coastal town, the air thick with salt and the faint scent of citrus. A car waited to take them up a winding road into the hills, where a stone villa overlooked a sweep of blue water dotted with white sails. The first day passed in a blur of sleep and silence. Claire napped on a lounge chair beneath the striped umbrella, while Lucas paced the terrace on calls about Project Helix, his voice alternating between sharp precision and weary restraint. The ocean below moved in slow, relentless patterns, indifferent to deadlines and broken hearts. On the second afternoon, he suggested a walk along a coastal path that wound behind the villa. The sky was a fierce, clean blue. The trail clung to the cliffside, offering dizzying views of rocks and surf far below. For a while, the beauty worked like a balm. She watched the waves slam into stone and thought of how her own life had done the same. Then her foot slipped on a loose patch of gravel. Pain stabbed up her ankle and the world tilted. She gasped and went down hard, hands scraping against the rough ground. The horizon spun. For a second, all she could register was the searing burn in her leg. Lucas was at her side almost instantly, dropping to a crouch, his hand hovering near her calf before making contact. "Can you move it?" he asked, his tone calm but edged with concern. She tried to flex, and a fresh bolt of pain answered. "It is sprained," he said quietly after a moment, fingers probing gently around the swelling joint. "We are done with cliffs today." Before she could protest, he scooped her up, her arms instinctively winding around his neck as the sheer solidity of him absorbed her weight. The world narrowed to the sound of his breathing and the steady rhythm of his footsteps on the uneven path. For the first time since everything fell apart, Claire let herself lean fully on someone else. Back at the villa, he set her carefully on a wide sofa near the open doors, propped her leg on cushions, and disappeared for a moment, returning with ice, bandages, and focused intensity. While he wrapped her ankle with practiced precision, his laptop chimed on the table, a silent reminder that somewhere inside this paradise, a storm of code and risk still waited to be understood. The villa settled into a rhythm over the next 24 hours, one built around Claire's immobilized ankle and Lucas's mounting work crisis. Mornings were warm and drowsy, sunlight pooling across the stone floors while the sea murmured beyond the terrace. Afternoons were punctuated by Lucas pacing in and out of the living room, earbuds in, voice clipped as he argued with engineers halfway across the world. Evenings were quieter, but the tension in him never fully eased, a tautness in his shoulders that betrayed how critical Project Helix had become. By the second day, Claire felt restlessness gnawing at her. The villa was beautiful, but she was trapped on one floor and tired of staring at the same walls. Lucas had just stepped out of a tense video call, muttering something about performance metrics and server load when she cleared her throat. "I am losing my mind," she announced flatly. Lucas glanced toward her from the doorway, exhaustion carved into the lines around his eyes. "Can I get you anything? More pillows? Another ice pack?" "Books," she said, gesturing helplessly. "Magazines, something that gives me the illusion I still have a functioning brain." "There is a library upstairs," he replied, already turning back to his laptop. "I cannot get upstairs, remember," she reminded him, lifting her bandaged ankle. He froze, eyes dropping, a flicker of guilt crossing his face. "Right, of course." A beat of silence passed, then she nodded toward the laptop in his hands. "Give me that, whatever you are working on. At least let me try to help." His eyebrows shot up. "Claire, Helix is not light reading. 40% of my engineers do not fully understand it, and they built it." She shrugged, boredom overriding humility. "Then I am due for a challenge." He hesitated. She could see him weighing her sincerity against his instinct to protect her from anything stressful. But after a long moment, he exhaled and set the laptop gently on the ottoman beside her. "Fine, do not delete anything." He returned to his calls while she opened the first file, expecting dense jargon to wash over her meaninglessly. And at first it did. Lines of computation, graphs of projected user scaling, piles of data flow diagrams. Then something snagged her attention. It was the smallest inconsistency, a single line in a model labeled Load Forecast Cycle 3. At first she assumed it was fatigue, but the longer she stared, the more wrong it felt. A subtle misalignment between input assumptions and output trend lines. A pattern she had not consciously been looking for, but recognized as easily as a familiar rhythm. Claire leaned closer, her pulse picked up. It was not a typo. It was not even a simple oversight. It was structural. A fundamental mathematical flaw in the algorithm that predicted server scalability under peak conditions. Under light load, the system would hold steady. Under heavy load, it would collapse exponentially. She rechecked it 3 times, each time feeling a cold, unmistakable certainty settle over her. When Helix launched, the system would fail. Not in days, in hours. She swallowed hard, her heart hammering in her ears. "Lucas," she said quietly. He waved a dismissive hand as he spoke into his headset. 30 seconds. "Lucas," she repeated, louder this time. Another wave of his hand. 2 minutes. The frustration and urgency finally collided in her chest. Lucas Hart. Her voice cut through the room like a blade. He stopped mid-sentence, told the person on the call he would ring back, and turned toward her, half annoyed, half alarmed. "What is it?" She tapped the screen with a trembling finger. This line, this entire assumption, it is wrong. Not kind of wrong, catastrophically wrong." He frowned, stepping closer. "Wrong how?" The architecture assumes linear growth in processing demand, she explained, breath quickening. But the actual pipeline forces an exponential compounding load after the third cycle. It will run perfectly for several hours, and then everything will implode. Implode is a large word, he said carefully. Yes, she replied, because it describes a large problem. He stared at the screen, then at her, then back at the screen again. Color drained from his face. And in that moment, before a single engineer confirmed her findings, Lucas Hart knew one irreversible truth. Claire Bennett had just changed the fate of Project Helix. For several long seconds after Claire revealed the flaw, Lucas stood frozen, staring at the cascading lines of code as if they had personally betrayed him. Then the CEO in him snapped awake. He grabbed the laptop, paced toward the terrace doors, and immediately launched an emergency call with his lead engineers. Claire watched from the sofa as his voice shifted into that rare tone of calm, lethal precision she had only heard in high-stakes meetings. He shared his screen. He showed them the flaw. Silence poured from the speakers. Then came frantic typing, hushed swearing, and eventual unanimous confirmation. She was right. Lucas ended the call and just stood there, one hand braced against the terrace railing, the other holding the laptop like it might explode. The sun was sinking behind him, turning his silhouette into something sharp and carved. She could see the tension rippling through his shoulders. When he finally turned back to her, the expression on his face had changed entirely. He was not looking at his assistant. He was looking at someone whose brilliance had just shifted the axis of his world. "How did you see that?" he asked quietly, approaching her with the kind of cautious curiosity normally reserved for rare and unpredictable phenomena. Claire looked down at her hands, twisting them once before forcing them still. She had known this question was coming. She had felt it hovering the moment he snatched the laptop away, and now there was no skirting it. "I was not always an administrative assistant," she said finally. The words felt small for the weight they carried. Lucas lowered himself onto the coffee table across from her, giving her his full attention. "Go on," he urged gently. "I was 2 years into a computer engineering degree at the University of Chicago," she said. "Systems design, algorithmic modeling, the works. I loved it. I was good at it." Her voice wavered slightly. "And I thought I knew exactly what my life was going to look like." "What happened?" he asked softly. "My father happened," she said bitterly. The memory of it flickered across her face like a shadow. "He was diagnosed with late-stage lymphoma. The treatments were expensive, and the insurance barely covered half. I dropped out to work full-time. Hospital bills, medications, home care. I did everything I could." Lucas listened without interrupting, his expression tightening with each word, the pieces falling into place. "He fought for 2 years," Claire continued, staring past him at the fading horizon. "I fought with him. But when he died, the debts didn't. They swallowed everything. Any chance of going back to school was gone, so I took the job I could get. I figured it would be temporary, just a way to stay afloat." Her voice softened, tinged with something fragile. "Then it became permanent. Life kept happening. And people stopped seeing me as anything other than an assistant." Lucas exhaled slowly, something heavy unfurling in his chest. He had never seen her this open, this unguarded. The Claire Bennett he knew was composed, sharp, disciplined. This Claire was all the things she never allowed the world to see. "Do you still love it?" he asked quietly. "Building systems, writing code, solving impossible problems." She nodded, unable to meet his gaze. "I never stopped. It was the one thing that made sense when everything else felt like a free fall. I still study on my own, follow research, take online classes when I can. It just never stopped feeling like the life I lost." Lucas sat back, stunned not by the story, but by the magnitude of everything she had carried alone. He suddenly felt the weight of every moment he had taken her competence for granted, every late night she'd stayed behind organizing chaos that should never have been hers to hold. He stood abruptly, pacing once before turning back to her with a resolve that sent a subtle tremor through the air. "Claire," he said, voice low but unwavering, "I'm going to fix this." She frowned. "Fix what?" "Everything," he said simply. "All of it. You deserve more than the life circumstance forced you into." He knelt before her, uncharacteristically earnest, the storm behind his eyes suddenly aimed in a new direction. Not at the problem she had found, but at the future he was determined to give back to her. "You are not meant to sit outside the work. You are meant to build it, and I am going to make sure you do." Claire stared at him, breath caught in her throat. It was the first moment she realized Lucas' heart was about to change her life in ways she had never dared to imagine. The next morning, the villa was hushed beneath a veil of pale golden light. Claire awoke to the soft rustle of curtains stirring in the sea breeze and the faint scent of citrus drifting in from the terrace. For a rare moment, she felt untethered, suspended between the life she had known and the one she suspected was waiting just beyond her reach. She pushed herself upright, careful of her ankle, and looked around for Lucas. His laptop was open on the table, its screen lit with charts, but no sign of him. It was early, but he had already been up for hours. She heard his footsteps before she saw him. He entered the room still in yesterday's dress shirt, sleeves rolled, collar undone, as though he had been fighting a war with numbers instead of people. Yet despite the fatigue brewing in the set of his shoulders, there was something different about him, a determination sharpened into something almost dangerous. "Good morning," she offered. He nodded once, but did not return the greeting. Instead, he moved straight to the bookshelf, pulled down a thick folder, and walked toward her. The absence of his usual polished composure made her pulse quicken. "Claire, sit back," he said gently, pulling the coffee table closer and placing the folder on top. She eyed it warily. "What is that?" He lowered himself onto the edge of the sofa beside her. "An offer. Before you panic, it is not the kind that locks you into anything you do not want. I promise you that." She hesitated before opening the folder. Inside was a document typed on heavy cream paper with a Prescott Industries letterhead. She scanned the first few lines and her breath hitched. Scholarship agreement, tuition coverage, full academic reinstatement, living stipend, guaranteed senior engineer role upon graduation. She blinked, unsure her eyes were working correctly. Lucas watched her face, every flicker of emotion reflected in his own expression. "This is not charity," he said quietly. "You need to understand that before anything else. This is not me saving you. You saved Helix. You saw something my entire engineering division missed. You think I am offering you generosity. I am offering you investment. And not just any investment, my most important one." Her fingers trembled slightly on the page. Lucas continued, his voice gentler than she had ever heard it. "You belong on the front lines of innovation, not tethered to a desk managing schedules. You deserve your degree, your place in the field, your future back, and I am prepared to fund it to the last cent." She shut the folder abruptly, pressing her palm against it as if the solidness could ground her. Lucas leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You once told me coding made sense when nothing else did. I want you to have the chance to finish what you started, not because of me, not for me, but for you." She felt heat sting her eyes, but blinked fiercely to keep the tears at bay. Claire Bennett did not cry in front of people. She especially did not cry in front of billionaires offering life-altering contracts. Lucas reached into the folder again and pulled out a single sheet of paper, laying it gently in her lap. "This is the real contract," he said. She looked down. It was handwritten, one paragraph, no legal wording, no clauses. "I, Lucas Hart, agree to sponsor Claire Bennett's education in full. In return, she agrees only to pursue the future she deserves." Claire's throat tightened. She looked at him, searching his face for the catch, the hidden motive, the trap she knew powerful men sometimes laid without meaning to. Instead, she saw sincerity so unguarded it startled her. "Lucas, this is too much." "No," he said, shaking his head with quiet conviction. "This is exactly right. You gave me back control of my company's future. Let me give you back control of yours." She exhaled, a long, shaky breath that seemed to release something inside her she had been holding for years. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine what life might look like if she said yes. A return to school, a future she thought she had buried, a chance to finally become who she had once dreamed of being. But beneath all of that, threaded quietly between each possibility, was something deeper, something more dangerous, something that trembled faintly in the space between them. Hope. She looked up at him, the folder still open across her knees, and realized that accepting this offer was not just about her future, it was about trusting him, and that was the most terrifying part of all. Their final evening in Italy arrived wrapped in a warm amber glow. The sun sank slowly toward the horizon, spilling molten gold across the terrace of the villa. Claire sat at the long wooden table overlooking the sea, her ankle propped on a cushion, her mind still reeling from the contract Lucas had given her that morning. She had signed it, not because she needed saving, but because for the first time in years she felt the ground steady beneath her feet. Lucas had not offered a lifeline, he had offered belief. When he stepped onto the terrace carrying 2 plates of dinner, he looked different somehow. Lighter, though traces of the past few days still etched lines near his eyes. She watched him set the plates down and sink into the chair across from her. The quiet between them had shifted. It no longer carried heaviness or unspoken questions. It carried possibility. They ate slowly, exchanging small, comfortable fragments of conversation. They talked about the village down the hill where he used to escape during summers when the pressure of his family name suffocated him. She told him about her childhood afternoons spent dismantling radios and small motors with her father, learning the language of circuitry long before she ever touched a keyboard. Bit by bit, story by story, they opened doors that had remained locked for years. Eventually, the conversation drifted to Project Helix. Lucas stared into the fading sunset, his voice quieter than before. "You know, if Helix had launched with that flaw, my company might not have survived it. Investors, boards, the entire industry. It would have been devastating." Claire studied him, surprised by the vulnerability, but instead of crumbling under the weight of that admission, she felt something tighten in her chest. Respect, admiration, understanding. "You would have figured it out," she said gently. "Eventually. Maybe. But I am glad I saw it." Lucas met her gaze, something unspoken passing between them. "You did more than see it. You saved it." Silence settled again, softer this time. The sky darkened, stars flickered alive above them. The candles on the table cast warm halos across their faces. Claire felt the shift before she fully realized it. Lucas reached out, his hand slipping over hers. His touch was warm, steady. The connection jolted something deep inside her, something she had refused to let herself acknowledge until now. "Claire," he said softly, his voice unsteady in a way she had never heard. "I know you are still hurting. I know I am the last person who should be complicating that. But I need to be honest with you." She held her breath. The world narrowed to the space between them. "From the moment you walked into my office, I knew there was something extraordinary about you. I tried to tell myself it was just competence, admiration, professional respect. But it wasn't. This weekend only confirmed what I have been refusing to face for a long time." His thumb brushed lightly against her skin, barely a whisper of contact. "I am falling for you, Claire. I think I have been for months." The confession hit her like a wave, not a violent one, a warm one that lifted rather than drowned. She felt the air between them thicken, pulse with something fragile and electric. She swallowed hard, fighting the instinct to retreat behind old walls. But walls felt pointless here, too small, too dishonest. Lucas leaned closer, as if asking permission without words. She tilted her chin up, meeting him halfway. The kiss was slow, careful at first, then deeper as weeks of tension unraveled between them. It tasted of wine and candlelight and something she had buried for too long. By the time they finally broke apart, they remained inches apart, their foreheads touching, breaths mingling in the soft night air. The world outside faded. The villa, the sea, the skyline of her old life. None of it mattered. What mattered was the truth she could no longer deny. The lines they had once sworn to keep between them were no longer blurred. They were gone. Returning to the city after Italy felt like waking from a vivid dream only to collide with reality's sharp edges. The villa, the fragile blooming connection, the unexpected tenderness between them, all of it felt both impossibly close and painfully distant as the elevator doors opened onto the polished marble floors of Heart Technologies. Claire stepped out beside Lucas, her ID badge clipped neatly to her collar again, her ankle still wrapped beneath her slacks. She expected whispers, questions, curious glances. What she got instead was silence. The office hummed with its usual controlled chaos, but no one seemed to notice anything different, except everything was different. She had enrolled back in school. She had a new hybrid role shadowing the engineers on Project Helix. She carried a quiet confidence she had never owned before. And Lucas, he was gentler, calmer. The lines carved by years of pressure had softened slightly in her presence. Their new reality existed in the in-between shared glances across conference rooms, late nights reviewing architecture diagrams together, accidental brushes of hands that were not accidents at all. For a time, it felt like the beginning of something rare, something real. Then the email arrived. It landed in Claire's inbox on an otherwise unremarkable Thursday morning. She clicked it absent-mindedly while sipping stale office coffee. An unfamiliar sender, a polished signature. Ronald Hale, founder of Hale Innovations, a rival tech mogul known for his ruthlessness and uncanny ability to poach rising talent. Dear Ms. Bennett, he wrote, I have been following the buzz surrounding your recent contributions to Project Helix. I would be honored to meet and discuss your future. Claire blinked at the screen, stunned. Someone outside of Lucas's world had noticed her work. Not her clerical tasks, not her organization skills, but her mind, her engineering instincts. It felt like validation echoing from a corner of the industry she never expected to reach. When she told Lucas, she expected a smile, pride, maybe even a hint of teasing. Instead, he went very still. Be careful, Claire, he said quietly. Hale is not looking to build you up. He is looking to undermine me, and using you to do it. The warning was logical, cold, detached. It stung more than she wanted to admit. It is just a conversation, she replied. I am not defecting. But even as she said it, tension coiled in his jaw, a seed of something she had not seen in him before. Fear, or worse, distrust. Still, she went. She told herself it was harmless, professional, that she needed to learn how people outside Heart Technologies perceived her. The meeting was at a modern glass restaurant downtown. Hale was polished, charming, and dangerously persuasive. He praised her insight, her discovery, her potential. He listened with an attentiveness she had rarely experienced. It felt flattering, empowering. But beneath the warmth lay something sharp, a subtle drip of poison. He is paying for your education, Hale said with a sympathetic tilt of his head. That is not investment. It is leverage, a method of controlling the narrative, keeping you quiet, keeping you tied to him. Claire stiffened, shaking her head. That is not true. Is it not? Hale countered softly. Are you sure you did not mistake gratitude for loyalty and loyalty for obligation? The words unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. She tried to brush them aside, thanking Hale for his time before leaving. But as she stepped onto the sidewalk outside, she felt a strange unease settle over her, a feeling she could not quite name. She did not know that in the corner of the restaurant, obscured behind a tall sculptural plant, someone had been watching her the entire time. Julian Price, Lucas's chief of staff. He watched Claire lean forward over the table. He watched Hale smile. He watched them exit moments apart. He lifted his phone. No text, no explanation, just a photo. A photo that made the meeting look intimate, conspiratorial, wrong. He sent it to Lucas with a single sentence that ignited everything. We may have a problem. When Claire returned to Heart Technologies that afternoon, flushed with confusion and an unplaceable dread, she found Lucas standing in the center of the open workspace. His expression was unreadable, his posture rigid. My office, now. His tone was not the voice of the man who kissed her in Italy. It was the voice of the CEO who was about to break her heart. The moment Claire stepped into Lucas's office, she felt the temperature drop, not in the air, but in him. The door closed behind her with a soft click that echoed like a verdict. Lucas stood near the windows, the skyline stretching out behind him like a cold steel backdrop. His jaw was tight, his shoulders stiff. His eyes, normally warm when they landed on her, were flat and guarded. She had seen him angry before, frustrated, stressed, but never like this. He held up his phone. On the screen was the photo Julian had taken. Claire at the table with Ronald Hale. Hale leaning forward, hand near hers. A moment frozen in the worst possible interpretation. "Explain this, Claire." His voice was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that comes before something breaks. She stared at the picture, disbelief twisting in her stomach. That is not what it looks like. Hale asked to meet. He wanted to talk about my future, about potential opportunities. I thought it was harmless. Lucas let out a soft, humorless laugh. Harmless. Claire, that man has been trying to undermine me for years. And you went to lunch with him, alone. You are making it sound like I betrayed you, she said, her voice unsteady. He reached out to me. I thought you would be proud someone noticed my work. Proud. His voice sharpened. Claire, he is manipulating you. He used you, and you walked right into it. Her pulse kicked painfully in her chest. You warned me he was dangerous. You did not tell me I was not allowed to speak to anyone. I am not your property. His eyes flashed. That is not what this is. Is it not? She asked, anger slowly rising to meet her fear. Because you are looking at me like I owe you something. Like I crossed some invisible line I did not know existed. Lucas took a step closer. Did he offer you something? A job? A contract? A salary I cannot match? She reeled back as if struck. You think I am for sale. The words tasted bitter, ugly. He exhaled sharply. Claire, be reasonable. You met with my biggest rival. Right after I put my reputation on the line to invest in you. The timing does not look good. Her chest tightened painfully. This was not the man who carried her through the cliffs of Italy. This was not the man who kissed her under a sky full of stars. This was the man shaped by betrayal, paranoia carved into him by ghosts she had not caused. You think I would let someone buy me off after everything we have shared? Her voice cracked. After Italy, after the trust you asked for? He swallowed hard, but the suspicion did not fade from his eyes. Just tell me what he offered you, he said quietly. Tell me the truth. Claire felt something inside her fracture, slowly, irreversibly. There was no offer, she whispered. But there is clearly something inside you that cannot believe that. For the briefest moment, something flickered in his expression. Hurt, confusion, regret, but suspicion smothered it before it could grow. Claire lifted trembling fingers to the badge clipped to her collar. She unclipped it with a small click that pierced the silence. She stepped forward and placed it gently on his desk. I quit. Lucas froze. Claire, wait. No, she said softly, her voice now steady with the clarity of heartbreak. If you think so little of my integrity, then you never knew me at all. She stepped back toward the door. Claire, listen to me, he said, voice strained. I am not saying I do not care. I am saying the situation looks suspicious. I am saying I need answers. She turned to face him one last time. You want answers. You should have asked me like a partner, not interrogated me like a suspect. You should have trusted me the way I trusted you. She hesitated, her voice lowering to a fragile whisper. Italy was real for me, but clearly it was not enough for you to believe in me. His lips parted, but no words came. She opened the door, walked out, and for the first time since the villa, Lucas did not follow. He stood alone in his glass office, staring at her badge on the desk. It looked painfully small, and so was he, in that moment, realizing the truth too late. He had not lost an assistant, he had lost the woman who had saved his company, and possibly the woman he loved. The days that followed her resignation unfolded like a stretch of empty highway, long and quiet and unbearably exposed. Claire returned to her cramped apartment, the one she had barely seen over the past few months, and found it both familiar and foreign. The textbook still lay open on her small desk. Her half-built circuitry models sat neatly stacked, waiting for her hands. The life she had built before Lucas was right where she had left it, but she was not the same person returning to it. She expected anger to carry her, or pride, or the stubborn resilience that had kept her afloat for years. Instead, she was left with silence, heavy, aching silence that filled the corners of her apartment and pressed against her ribs when she tried to sleep. She did not cry, not at first. She moved through the motions of her days like someone underwater. She kept telling herself she had made the right choice, that respect mattered more than romance, that trust was not negotiable, that walking away was the only self-respecting decision she could make. But at night, the memory of his voice rose like a tide. Explain this. What did he offer you? He used you. Words sharp enough to bruise. And beneath all of that, the memory of Italy flickered in quiet betrayal. A week passed. Then another. She received a formal email from HR, thanking her for her time at Heart Technologies. She deleted it without reading the attachment. She blocked Ronald Hale's attempts to contact her. She declined project invitations from classmates. She told her professor she needed time to focus on her coursework, but none of it filled the hollow space he had left. Lucas did not call. He did not text. He did not show up at her door like the part of her that still foolishly hoped thought he might. But just because he did not reach out did not mean he was unaffected. Across the city, Lucas moved through his days with calculated precision, but the gears of his life had begun to slip. Meetings blurred together. Investors noticed his distraction. His leadership team exchanged uneasy glances when he snapped over minor issues. Project Helix fell behind schedule as he rewrote the data integrity architecture himself instead of delegating, as if trying to erase the part she had touched in order to stop thinking about her. Except he could not. Her absence was everywhere. In the empty chair outside his office, in the gaps in his schedule she used to quietly fill, in the diagrams she had corrected, in the careful notes she had left behind, in the new stability of Project Helix that existed solely because of her insight. He replayed their confrontation more times than he cared to admit. Every detail, every word he wished he had swallowed, every moment he wished he could rewrite. The hurt in her eyes haunted him most. Not anger, not betrayal, disappointment. He told himself she should not have met Hale. He clung to that as justification, a thin thread of logic against the heavier truth pressing against him. He had not trusted her, not fully, and for Claire trust was not optional. It was oxygen. One night, close to midnight, Lucas sat alone in his penthouse, staring out at the city lights flickering against the glass. His phone lay face down beside him, silent and accusing. Julian walked in without knocking, carrying a stack of project folders. "Sir, we need to finalize the test suite by morning. The board expects a full report." Lucas did not turn from the window. "Cancel tomorrow's meeting." Julian froze. "Sir, the board has been pushing for an update since I said cancel it," Lucas repeated, the exhaustion in his voice cutting deeper than anger ever could. Julian hesitated, processing the shift, then quietly asked the question no one else dared. "This is about Claire, isn't it?" Lucas closed his eyes. For a long time he did not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. "I ruined something I cannot replace." Julian set the folders down slowly. "Sir, with respect, the photo was misleading. I should have communicated context, but the way things unfolded afterward, that was on you." The honesty landed like a blow. "I know," Lucas admitted quietly, "and I intend to fix it." But when he picked up his phone again, thumb hovering over her name, something unexpected cut through the silence. Fear. Fear that she would not answer. Fear that she had moved on. Fear that even if she picked up, there was no version of this conversation that would erase the damage he had caused. Across the river, Claire sat at her desk processing a scholarship application she never thought she would have the confidence to submit. She paused halfway through the form, sensing something nameless rise inside her. Two people. Two separate rooms. Two hearts circling the same truth. Something had to break the silence. But neither of them knew who would be brave enough to do it first. It happened on a cold Sunday morning when the city felt half asleep and the streets outside Claire's apartment were muted under a thin veil of fog. She sat at her kitchen table with a cup of untouched tea cooling beside her laptop. She had been working through a complex algorithmic homework problem for nearly an hour, but her mind kept drifting to the same place it had wandered all week, the unresolved echo of everything left unsaid between her and Lucas. She finally exhaled and pushed the laptop away. Clarity often arrived quietly, not dramatically, and this morning it whispered a truth she had avoided for too long. She missed him. Not the CEO, not the man who had interrogated her with suspicion. She missed the one who had carried her through ancient cobblestone paths in Italy, the one who listened to her father's stories with reverence, the one who kissed her like she was something rare. That man had been real too, and losing him hurt more than the accusation itself. Before she could decide what to do with that truth, a knock sounded at her door. Gentle, hesitant, almost disbelieving. Her breath caught. She opened the door and found Lucas standing in the hallway, rain clinging to his hair and coat as if he had been walking in it for miles. His eyes looked tired, not from lack of sleep, but from carrying something too heavy for too long. "Claire," he said quietly, as if her name was the one anchor he trusted. She stepped aside without a word, letting him in. He stood in the center of her small living room, so out of place in its warmth and clutter. For several seconds neither spoke, the silence trembling with too many unsaid things. Finally, Lucas drew a breath that sounded like it hurt. "I owe you the truth, the whole truth. No defensiveness, no excuses, just honesty." Claire kept her arms folded, bracing herself. "I reacted out of fear," he said, every word deliberate. "Fear of losing my company, fear of being outmaneuvered, fear that the past I have never fully escaped was repeating itself. When I saw that photo, I thought I knew what it meant. But the truth is, I saw what I was afraid of, not what was real. And I took that fear out on you." She looked at him, her voice low. "It felt like you never believed in me. Not really." Lucas's voice cracked. "I did. I do. More than I know how to admit. But I let the pressure of everything I am responsible for distort the one thing I should have protected. You." He moved slowly, placing a thin folder on her table. Inside were documents, emails, internal reports, project files. Proof. Transparent, unfiltered proof. "I investigated Hale, not you. He orchestrated the whole thing. He is launching a competitor to Helix, and he planned to use you to destabilize me." His assistant admitted it. Julian found the correspondence. "I wanted you to see it yourself." Claire opened the folder with trembling fingers. His explanations matched everything she saw. Every letter, every timeline, every motive. A wave of relief and anger tangled in her chest. "You should have come to me first," she whispered. "I know, and I will regret that failure for a long time. But Claire," she looked up, "I am not here to win you back as an employee. I am here because I cannot lose you as a person. What we had in Italy, what grew between us before that, it was real. I know I broke something. But if there is anything left that can be rebuilt, I will fight for it. On your terms, slowly, honestly. No power imbalance. You choose the pace. You choose everything." His voice held nothing but sincerity and exhaustion and hope. Claire felt something inside her loosen. Not forgiveness, not yet. But the tight fist of pain that had held her together these past weeks finally unclenched. She closed the folder, then closed the space between them until she stood only a breath away. "I do not know where this goes," she said softly, "and I cannot promise anything yet. But I do know you showed up, and that matters." Lucas nodded, exhaling a breath he had been holding since the day she walked out of his office. "Then maybe," he said gently, "we can start again. Not as CEO and assistant, not as people defined by fear, but as two human beings who found something worth not losing." Claire hesitated for only a moment before she stepped into him, resting her forehead against his chest. His arms circled her with a careful tenderness that felt like a vow instead of a claim. Outside, the fog lifted slowly from the city. Inside, something even heavier began to lift from them both. Not a perfect reconciliation, not an ending, a beginning, a real one.